See this bush over here? Yeah, there's a weird trick you can do with these to get free assassinations just like a smoke bomb. Normally, these bushes work just like stealth grass, letting you sneak up on and ambush enemies. But unlike the grass, the bushes actually let you instantly regain stealth, even if you have a bunch of enemies right on top of you. And all you have to do is literally just walk into one and crouch. Enemies will lose track of you instantly, and then you can immediately turn around and assassinate them for instant kills. When I first came across this, I honestly thought it was just a one-off glitch, but it's totally reproducible and even works with some low-hanging tree branches as well. I found it most useful in Teshio Ridge just because there seemed to be more bushes across that whole region, but you can definitely find bushes in other parts of the map as well. Of course, it's possible this is a bug that'll get patched at some point, but for now, it's actually a surprisingly useful trick to keep in your back pocket. But what's definitely not a bug is how sometimes the enemy's stagger bar gets highlighted with this thicker orange outline. You might not have even noticed that, but you definitely want to pay attention to it because it's actually related to parrying. So we'll come back to that in just a minute, but first let me show you how to parry more consistently. Perfect parries in particular are definitely tougher than they were in Tsushima, but the counterattacks you get are still super satisfying, and there are some tricks to nail perfect parries more consistently so you can get those counters more often. But first, let's fast forward a few hundred years to try out some Japanese military vehicles in today's sponsor, War Thunder, the epic multiplayer free-to-play military action experience where you get to control the coolest military vehicles in intense battles across land, air, and sea. Choose from a huge roster of planes, helis, ships, and tanks from 10 nations spanning the mid-20th century through present day. And what I think is really cool is the authentic damage system. No dumbed-down health bars. Your ammo choice, positioning, and precision actually matter with realistic component-level damage. Queue into a match in epic locations from Alaska to Africa and destroy enemies, capture locations, and complete mission objectives to support your team and earn upgrades for your vehicle. The new Tusk Force update adds the long-awaited BM Oplot T tank, the Buck M3 SAM system, Hornet fighters, and a bunch more new machines. The Poland and Eastern Europe maps have also been completely overhauled, and graphics and physics have once again been significantly enhanced to make destruction and explosions even more immersive and realistic. New players will receive 100,000 Silver Lions and a special Eagle of Valor decorator. And actually, you can even claim those special rewards if you just haven't played in 6 months or more. Check out the links in the description to download War Thunder for free for PlayStation, PC, and Xbox. And check out War Thunder Mobile on iOS or Android to play on the go. The first thing to understand about parrying is that if you're timing it based on the blue flash, you're pretty much never going to be able to do it consistently. The problem is, the blue flash isn't actually meant to help you time the parry. All the blue flash says is, hey, this attack that's coming up, you can't block it. You either have to parry it or dodge it. That's it. It doesn't have anything to do with timing. And if you try to use the flash to time your parry, it's going to mess you up because the flash just happens at the start of an attack animation, and the different animations are all different lengths before the enemy actually swings to hit Atsu. So if you want to get perfect parries more often, you've got to train yourself to stop using the blue flash for timing. Instead, you want to pay attention to the enemy's weapon itself. The requirement for a perfect parry is that you hit the block button just before the enemy's weapon actually hits Atsu. Now, it can be a little hard to track the weapon sometimes because that blue flash often kind of covers it up, but watching the weapon is definitely what you want to do. I've found it works well to either watch the tip of the weapon or keep an eye on the enemy's hand and watch for when it's swinging past their side. That's a good visual indicator to time your parry with. Another trick I like to use is actually watching the enemy's weapon in my peripheral vision. Believe it or not, your peripheral vision is actually better at tracking motion than when you look directly at something. So if you look just off to the side of the enemy, instead of looking at them or their weapon directly, it can actually be easier to time your parry. Or you can stare at the enemy's body directly, but just try to watch their weapon in your peripheral vision. Now, when you're actually ready to hit the button for a parry, you can either tap it or hold it down. And that might sound kind of insignificant, but I always recommend holding it down. It makes it a bit easier to connect in the right window. And if you're too early, you won't get a parry, but at least you'll be blocking when the attack lands, so you'll still avoid damage, against normal non-flash attacks at least. Of course, the blue flash attacks will hit you through your block, but still, it's worth building a habit of holding block for a moment when you go for a parry, as opposed to just tapping it quickly. And remember, you don't need the enemy to do a blue flash attack to do a parry or perfect parry. You can parry and perfect parry any normal non-flash attack as well. Even better, you can get in a habit of always holding block until you're ready to go for a parry. Then, when you're ready, just release block for a split second and immediately press it down again to attempt the parry. Holding a block by default like this means you can maintain maximum protection, and you're only vulnerable for a split second when you attempt the parry. But honestly, if you want to get good at perfect parries, you should use the perfect dodge to practice first. Perfect dodges have the same timing as perfect parries, so if you can manage to get perfect dodges pretty consistently, then you can be more confident attempting perfect parries. But the key to translating your perfect dodge practice to perfect parries is to remind yourself to pay close attention to what the enemy looks like when you get a perfect dodge. You want to try to train yourself to notice what their body position looks like when you get a perfect dodge, because that's what you need to keep an eye out for when you want a perfect parry. Fortunately, the game's slow-mo effect when you get a perfect dodge helps with that. During that slow-mo moment, try to remind yourself to take a look at the enemy to see how they're positioned. And actually, you can watch enemies in slow motion anytime you want by just holding down the weapon switch button. This can be helpful for studying enemy attack animations, and you can even get in a habit of using it in combat to more easily time your parry. Just keep in mind, you can't actually block or parry while holding the weapon switch button, so you have to let it go and exit slow motion before going for the parry. And the thing is, I don't think you're truly going to do this weapon switch slow-mo trick every time an enemy attacks. So you actually have to be a bit careful using it, because you can sort of end up training the wrong muscle memory. But it is definitely useful for getting a clearer look at enemy attack animations to at least learn when they actually go for that final swing at Atsu. But personally, I think the best way to get better at parrying is to just go find yourself one of the non-story duel enemies and plan to simply practice against them for a little while. Start out just trying to get perfect dodges and try to stay alive as long as possible. Don't actually attack them, just practice dodging and parrying until you feel you can do it consistently. And if you are about to kill the enemy, either let them kill you instead, or open the menu, go to settings, and hit the triangle to reload from the last checkpoint to respawn them at full health so you can practice more. The other big recommendation I have for parrying is to actually not use the Bounty Master armor until you're very good at parrying. The Bounty Master armor is really cool because it makes it easier to perfect parry and perfect dodge, but it disables regular parries, which, if you're trying to get better at parrying, is only going to make your life a lot harder for no reason, especially on higher difficulties. Regular parries, which are just when you and the enemy sort of quickly rotate around each other, are really useful too, because they build up extra stagger just like a perfect parry. They just don't get the slow-mo effect and counterattack for free damage like a perfect parry. If you want to make parrying easier, then a better first step is to equip the Charm of Futsunushi, which extends the window for parries, and perfect dodges, similar to the Bounty Master armor, but with no downsides. To get it, you need to do the Faithful Leap Shrine, which is over here on the east side of the Tokachi range. Definitely one I recommend grabbing ASAP. And of course, you can always switch to a custom difficulty setting and just adjust the parry timing down if it's really driving you crazy. But what about that orange bar on the stagger meter we mentioned earlier? Well, you definitely want to pay attention to that, because it indicates you have an opportunity to get a big boost to stagger buildup, but only if you do the right kind of attack while the bar is still orange. The orange bar appears anytime you parry or perfect parry, and it'll hang around for a few seconds before fading away. Now, while it's still there, if you're weapon aligned, meaning you're using the correct weapon the game wants you to use against the enemies, then you can either do a regular heavy attack, a hold and release heavy attack, that's technically called a focused attack, or a counter attack, which is what you can do after a perfect parry or dodge to get the boosted stagger buildup. For weapon alignment, I'll put the proper matchings on screen now, And remember, the major benefit of weapon alignment in general is significantly increased stagger buildup with heavy and focused attacks, even when you don't have the orange bar. Now, if you're not weapon aligned when you get the orange bar, you can still get the boosted stagger buildup, but in that case, only counterattacks will do the trick, which means you have to get a perfect parry or perfect dodge. The stagger boost is pretty significant, so regardless of whether you like to play weapon aligned or not, you should definitely keep an eye out for it and try to take advantage of it whenever you can. Oh, and it does show up on regular enemies as well. It's a little harder to see it on the small stagger bars over their heads, but it operates exactly the same for them. But you should also know about a bunch of other cool tricks, like how if you get disarmed by an enemy's gold attack, you don't actually have to go to run to pick up your weapon immediately. Remember, Atsu has multiple weapons, so when you get disarmed, only the weapon you are actively using is lost. For example, if you lose the Yari Spear, you can just switch to the katanas or kusarigama to stay in the fight until you can make it over to your Yari to pick it up. And actually, if you lose the katana, remember Atsu has two, so if you switch to dual katanas after losing one, she'll actually still be able to use the other one as a single katana. Although, of course, that means losing the dual katanas means you can't use the single one at all until you go pick up at least one of them. In my previous videos, we saw some different ways you could burn enemies using different environmental objects, but the pyromaniac in me couldn't resist finding some more. So we mentioned the hanging braziers, but you can hit these standing braziers with arrows or knock them over with a melee attack or shoulder charge to dump out hot embers and light people up. It's also very easy to end up forgetting about all the tools you have. There's a good chance you're already using smoke bombs a lot to give yourself easy chain assassination, but the other tools are really helpful too, particularly the Metsubushi throwing sand and kunai, because they can interrupt enemies and create easy openings for you to attack, not only with regular enemies, but in duels as well. And in duels, keep in mind you do have access to all your tools and ranged weapons, so if you want, you can whip out some heavy arrows for a cheeky headshot, fire arrows to get the opponent burning, or even throwing bombs for some easy damage. It's easy to forget about using your spirit charged abilities as well, like Heavenly Slash for the katana. Not only do these always guarantee damage, but they also guarantee you'll do it totally safely because they instantly interrupt whatever the enemy is doing. So you can sort of use them like a panic button. There's also a couple of advanced techniques for the katana and dual katanas you're probably not using enough. On the katana, the very last unlock is EI Lightning Storm, and if you know how to use it properly, it can deal a lot of damage. The key is understanding that it actually wants you to pause for a moment between each attack. So you start by holding down heavy attack to sheath the katana just until you see a flash near the hilt, and then release to do the initial move. But after that, you don't want to hit heavy attack again right away. You want to wait a moment for Atsu to automatically move into a new stance, and you'll see another flash near the katana's hilt. That's when you want to hit heavy attack again, and then she actually does this one more time for the final move. If you do the correct pauses and hit heavy attack only when the katana's hilt flashes, each of the attacks will interrupt the enemy, so it's safer than it looks and they deal a good chunk of damage. But the other technique that I use even more is the dual katana Tempest Strike, because it actually gives you a blue flash unblockable attack that behaves similar to spirit charged attacks like Heavenly Slash, but it doesn't cost any spirit at all. To do a Tempest Strike, you need to start by holding down heavy attack and then releasing. And then you just follow up with 5 more presses of heavy attack, and the last one will be unblockable. All the moves leading up to the final one are really quick, so it's relatively easy to get them in without the enemy retaliating, so you can get to the blue unblockable move fast. But it gets really good once you unlock Improved Tempest Strike, which boosts the damage a bunch, and dual Tempest Strikes, which adds a second unblockable attack to the end of the combo. Now, while you're sneaking around camps, we discussed in previous videos how useful empty sake jars can be, but sometimes you just pick one up by mistake and you don't want to throw it to get rid of it because it'll smash and cause unwanted attention. So the quick, simple way to drop it is to just tap your block button. That'll instantly drop the sake jar without shattering it. You should also know that as you progress the main story and Atsu's home gets repaired, eventually there will be a rack of arrows there that refills every time you fast travel home. So you can just keep fast traveling to the bamboo strike and running over to restock on arrows for free, which is especially useful for some of the awesome ranged builds you can put together in the late game. I'll put my build video right here on screen as soon as it's ready. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you over there in just a second.